Letter to my daughter. A new story built from old pages. Tai Duong. If one day you read this letter, you are probably far older than 8, old enough to understand why a woman can be terrified and steadfast at the same time for the sake of one child. I am writing not to make you pity me, and not to claim credit, but so you will know this. Every role people try to pin on you can be unpinned, and you have the right to choose your own story. I used to be a very modern person, living in a hurry, addicted to late-night novels, addicted to climaxes, addicted to the feeling of escaping reality through a few thousand words. Then one day I opened my eyes and realized I had fallen straight into a novel, not as the heroine, not as the beloved one, but as the wicked supporting girl's stepmother. Just hearing it sounds wrong, doesn't it? In stories, stepmother is often written as the villain, a cold face, a hard heart, a sharp tongue, showing up only to push the supporting girl into darkness. And the supporting girl was you, only 8 years old. When I first stepped into that mansion, the hallway was so long that my footsteps sounded like keystrokes. Paintings lined the walls, each one like a pre-written line. Elegant, chilly, with no room for warmth. You stood on the stairs, black hair falling to your shoulders, wide eyes with a needle-sharp stare exactly like the description the girl who will later blacken that I had once read. You looked at me and didn't call me aunt, didn't call me mom, only asked a question that sounded innocent but cut like a blade. Who are you? I was about to answer with a long explanation, about to play the gentle stepmother to avoid conflict, when glowing comments suddenly flashed before my eyes like a live stream overlay. Oh, the stepmother is here. The supporting girl is about to plot. Wait for the kid to ruin her. I froze. I understood then. This wasn't just a novel. It was a stage with an invisible audience. And that audience liked tragedy more than happiness. You disliked me from the start, not because you were bad, but because you had been abandoned since birth, and everyone around you tried to patch that void with silence. You mistook me for the birth mother who disappeared, so you hated me for coming back too late. When you learned I wasn't, you hated me again for taking the place of that imagined mother. The truth is, when children hate someone, it's often not because that person did wrong, but because a child's heart doesn't know where to put pain. So you placed it on me. I remember your first trick clearly. You handed me a motherhood DNA test, solemn, scientific, and stared as if delivering a verdict. I lowered my eyes. The result was printed plainly. Mother-child relationship test. Genetic similarity, 0%. You pressed your lips together and asked softly, "See? You're not my mom. Go away." The comments roared. Ha 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 ha, she's savage. Kick her out. Right on script. I couldn't laugh. 0%, a number that sounded absolute, yet to me it was an opening. I looked up and asked you, "If I'm not your mother, then who do you want me to be?" You went still. That question wasn't in the script. I stopped chasing the role. I began talking to you like a small person trying very hard to be grown. I asked what you like to eat. You said don't need. I asked where you wanted to go. You said don't need. I asked if you were afraid of the dark. You said no. But on the first night I heard your door creak open, and a small shadow stood in the hallway. You weren't crying. You were just standing there, clutching a worn plush bear as if letting go would drop you into an abyss. I didn't call you over. I sat down outside my own room, spread a thin blanket on the floor, and said, "If you don't want to sleep alone, you can sit here. You don't have to call me Mom. You don't have to trust me. You only need to be safe." You stood for a long time. Then you sat down. That night I learned, changing fate doesn't begin with grand gestures. It begins with letting a child be allowed not to be strong. Your father he was, the kind of man novels label domineering CEO. Cold, busy, few words, convinced money could solve everything. He watched me warily, as if I were a dangerous variable in the family equation. In the original story, the stepmother would fight for favor, grow jealous, harm the child to seize wealth. I just wanted a peaceful dinner. But peace wasn't granted. On the third day, the butler reported, "Young Miss fought at school," and the comments flickered. "Her blackening begins. The male lead will hate her." I exhaled. A mandatory event. At school, you stood with your back straight, your knuckles still red, eyes unrepentant. The teacher called you aggressive. Classmates whispered you were undisciplined. I met your gaze and asked, "Did you hit to protect yourself? Or to prove something?" You bit your lip. "They said I'm unwanted." I nodded. So you hit because you hurt. Hurting is allowed. But next time, try something else. Tell the teacher you won't accept insults. Tell me, you don't need fists to earn the right to exist. You didn't answer. But that night you quietly left a bandage on my desk. Everyone thought I was only a woman who transmigrated into a novel. The truth was stranger. I once worked for an organization called the Time-Space Bureau, a backstage operations center that monitored pocket worlds like TV channels. I had been S-rank, handling derailed plots, pulling characters away from meaningless deaths, speaking to systems as to cold machines. Then an incident shut the Bureau's live stream down, the system withdrew, and I was retired, sent to live inside the life I had repaired. I thought it was over, until a white envelope appeared at my door, reminding me ink never truly dries. No sender, just 3 words. Expanded chapter. The moment I touched it, an alarm rang in my head. Interference detected from the meta-layer, origin unknown. The meta-layer, where the one holding the pen sits outside the story and imagines himself innocent. They like steering other people's emotions, bending characters to their will, calling it development, and they aimed at you. Because you, the supporting girl, were supposed to break, supposed to lose, supposed to hate. But you were growing up. Ordinary. Your ordinariness offended them. The next day, a new maid arrived. Lamb. Efficient, polite, yet she watched you like a camera watches a take. At dinner, she cooked the dish you hated most in the original story, trying to trigger conflict. You looked at the plate and said calmly, "I don't like it. Can I have something else?" I almost laughed with relief. You were learning to name your needs without fighting. Lamb slipped. But in the setting, young miss has to. I set my chopsticks down. Lamb wasn't a real person. She was a sentence inserted to pull you back into a role. That night I opened an old pocket watch. Its hands didn't move, but the glass reflected scrolling text. Expanded chapter has begun. Volume 2. Return the supporting girl to her orbit. I wasn't afraid of words. I had lived inside them. What I feared was you being turned into a tool for entertainment. On the second day at school, your essay was returned with a comment, character arc deviation. You asked me, "Mom, is it wrong to dream of being an aerospace engineer?" In the corner I saw a tiny seal. A pen stabbed into the moon. The mark of otherworld authors, script keepers. I understood. They didn't only want you in romance. They wanted you to be sacrificed so romance could look prettier. I folded your essay and held you. It isn't wrong. You're only living more truthfully than they want. That afternoon we went to the park. Your father stood far off on a call, thinking it was peaceful. Across from us sat a man in a black coat, white gloves, a face drawn in straight lines, beautiful and cold. He looked at you, then me, speaking like turning a page. Dumin, or should I call you mother character? You ruined the emotional structure needed for the love line. I'm here to correct it. I sent you to buy water, then asked, "Who are you?" He smiled. "My name doesn't matter." I nodded. "Because you aren't a person. You're a pen name." The air trembled. An invisible net of words appeared. He stepped back, shaken. I reached out and tore the net. I had learned how to cut text. He pulled out a black notebook. Every page a tragedy scheduled for you, fights, kidnapping, taking a bullet, obsessive love. I snatched it and tore one page. The words scattered like ash. He screamed, "You're not allowed." I answered, "Allowed by whom?" "If my child says no, that is permission." When you returned with the water, he knelt and tempted you like a character. "Do you want to know your future? You'll be loved wildly," pursued. "A dazzling supporting girl." You frowned and replied, "Small but clear. I want to be myself." That sentence cut the page in half. The notebook shook, the remaining pages shriveled. He vanished like ink washed away, leaving a broken fountain pen. Inside its core was a rolled slip. Expanded chapter volume 2. The supporting girl strikes back at the author. I laughed. They wanted a long game. So would I. But my way. Not by feeding tragedy, but by building choices and kindness. Your father finally truly woke up. He looked at the broken pen and memories flooded. The meetings he missed. The times he assumed money was enough. The way he managed you like a project. He asked, "What do we do?" I said, "Do what they hate most. Live ordinary, live decently, and don't let anyone write our child." It sounded simple. It was not. In a world bent by scripts, ordinary life is hard. On the third day, the pen and the moon seal appeared everywhere, receipts, notebooks, even your father's phone. An email hit his company. Mandatory scene. Financial crisis. In the original, he would go bankrupt, drink, neglect you, and you would darken. They were expanding the scope, writing the whole family. So your father and I sat down like teammates for the first time. I taught him to spot script bait. Situations too perfect. New faces arriving on cue. Lines repeating verbatim. Emotions forced to explode. He doubted, until he looked at you. You were doing homework. Making milk. Bandaging your own finger. He understood. If the script dragged you, he'd lose you. Not in death, but in identity. He began to change. Coming home on time. Eating with you. Reading bedtime stories. Learning to apologize without excuses. Small acts became nails in the floor, holding the house against the pull of text. But the meta layer didn't quit. They delivered a male lead for you. A new boy. Rich, brilliant, gentle in the exact way romance requires. In the original, he'd save you from bullying. You'd mistake it for love. Then jealousy and schemes would bloom. They staged it. Classmates spilled water on your notebook, and the boy appeared on cue, offering tissues with a memorized line. You don't have to be strong alone. You looked at him, then at me, at the end of the hall. You inhaled and said politely, "Thanks, but I can handle it. I'll tell the teacher." The bullies froze. The boy froze. And above, the comment feed glitched, like bad signal. Why isn't she crying? Why no jealousy? Why? That night the seal smeared across your window like wet ink. The wind felt like a blade. I knew they would turn to violence. When emotions can't be bent, events will. The kidnapping scene was supposed to happen at chapter 37, when you were 15, but an expanded chapter can drag tragedy earlier. I couldn't run forever. I had to go where words were written. I took the pocket watch to the city's old library, the place that hid a door back to the bureau. Between tall shelves and the smell of old paper, I found a nameless wooden door. I pressed the broken pen to the knob. It opened. Behind it wasn't a reading room, but a vast editing hall. Walls of paper, ceiling of text, lamps floating like punctuation. On a long table lay drafts with your name, your father's name, mine. Figures sat around it, faces blurred away, as if anonymity could dodge responsibility. A voice said, "Characters aren't allowed here." I answered, "I'm not a character. I'm someone who stepped out of the role." They sneered. "You stepped out because we allowed it, because you still have entertainment value. The girl doesn't. She must suffer so the audience will cry." "That's the law." I asked, "Whose law?" "The law of people who like watching others fall." Silence. I placed your essay on the table. "This is her dream." You stamped it, deviation. "But she isn't an arc. She's a person." A hand with a silver ring tapped the table. "What do you want?" I said. "Choice. Cancel every baseless mandatory scene. Stop using pain as seasoning." They laughed. "Without climax, who watches? Without tragedy, who remembers? You want to turn the story into everyday life?" I nodded. "Yes, everyday life has value. And if you can only write suffering, that's your limitation, not my child's fate." The drafts lifted, swirling into a storm of words, forming a prison. Paper cut my skin like knives. A warning blared. If trapped in meta, the outer timeline will be rewritten permanently. I had little time. I closed my eyes, recalling a bureau method. Find the soul anchor something not in the script. A real choice, a true line, an action for no audience. Your anchor, I want to be myself. Your father's, the night he apologized for being absent. Mine, the first night I spread a blanket outside your door. I clung to those anchors and spoke slowly, like an oath. If you write suffering because you fear being forgotten, I will write memory through love. If you need tragedy to keep viewers, I will keep the living through truth. And if you lock me in text, I will turn text into a way out. I dipped the broken pen in blood from my fingertip and wrote one sentence into the air. Characters have the right to refuse. Not poetic, not pretty, but true, and truth weighs more than cleverness. The prison shook. The storm slowed. "You're breaking structure," they shouted. I asked, "What structure matters more than a child?" In that hush, I heard a small chime. My pocket watch finally ticking. The hand moved one notch. A sign. Outside, your life was still salvageable. I tore a seam in the paper wall. and stepped through. When I returned home, dawn was near. You slept hugging your bear, lashes damp as if you'd dreamed. Your father sat pale in the living room, phone showing a strange message. Mandatory scene. Kidnapping. Location. Mall. Time. 14. He looked at me hoarsely. They're after her. I nodded. Yes, this time, we aim back. At 14, the mall was packed. In the original, you'd be lured by a friendly staffer, taken to a van, and your father would arrive 1 minute late, 1 minute enough to scar you. This time I held your hand, walked slow, watched every suspicious supporting cast piece. A balloon seller standing wrong, a guard leaving his post, a man in a cap checking his watch like waiting for cue. I saw the seal on a fake badge. The friendly staffer appeared right on time, sweetly. Hey kid, there's a free game over there. I'll take you. You looked at her, then at me. I didn't bark. No, I asked, do you want to go? You shook your head. No, I choose to stay with Mom. The air trembled. The staffer paled, as if losing control. So the meta layer switched to plan B. A small blast at an electronics counter enough to panic the crowd. Enough for you to be separated. That was how they forced climax, even when you refused. Your father pulled you into his arms to shield you. I didn't run with the crowd. I looked straight at the source and saw him again. The black coat, the white gloves, the pen name. He stood on the second floor like a director watching a set. If I chased him, you'd lose protection. If I stayed, he'd flee. I stayed, because my choice was you. I shouted, stay calm, follow the emergency exit, using the voice of someone who once commanded chaos to stop. The crowd listened. No stampede. No injuries. The climax was gutted. The pen name appeared before me like a cutscene. You ruined my scene, he hissed. I said, I saved people. He sneered. You're killing the story. I asked, whose story? Yours, or my daughter's life? He flung black words like blades. A line scraped my shoulder, burning like a deep paper cut. Your father yelled, stop, but the pen name didn't. He wanted to take the bullet scene, wanted me hurt so you'd be traumatized and slide into darkness. I understood instantly, and did the opposite. I didn't fall, didn't weep, didn't offer tragedy. I looked at you and said calmly, look at me. I'm okay. It's just a scratch. You owe nobody your pain. Your eyes reddened, but you didn't collapse. You nodded. Above us, a smear of ink thinned like smoke. He staggered back, whispering, impossible. Without tragedy. What do I write for? For the first time, I didn't just see an enemy. I saw a tired writer. I said, if you want to be remembered, write healing. If you fear no one will watch, write everyday courage. You don't have to hurt children to prove you have power. He shook. The words around him fell like dead leaves. He vanished. Not like ink washed away, but like someone choosing to step off the page. I don't know if he changed. I only know. You weren't kidnapped. You weren't rewritten. After that, you had a slight fever from exhaustion. I sat by your bed, wiped your forehead, told you airplane stories. You asked, Mom, why do they want me to hurt? I paused and answered, because some people think pain is what makes something matter. I think living is what matters. You asked, can I hate them? I said, you can dislike them, but don't let hatred turn you into someone else. Resist in a way that keeps you. You closed your eyes and squeezed my hand. In that room, between us, a real story was being lived. Time passed. You grew. You stopped trying to drive me out. You began calling me Mom naturally, as if it had always been so. Your father stopped being a CEO trope and became a father who cooked breakfast, picked you up in rain, listened without staring at his phone. Lamb, the maid sentence one day, asked to quit. I don't want to be a tool anymore. I want to study baking, she said. I smiled. Go. That's your choice. The seal on her apron faded, as if a side character choosing her own life could escape ink. I wasn't naive. The meta layer still existed. Sometimes another white envelope arrived. Expanded. Chapter. Volume 3. Volume 4. But each time the words grew weaker, because our home gained anchors. Meals with laughter. Nights with stories. Birthdays with candles. Apologies without conditions. Hugs. And your I don't want to being respected. Those were not flashy climaxes, but foundations. And scripts hate foundations. Scripts only, like, collapse. When you were 10, I took you for a checkup. In the hospital hallway, a woman waited, light perfume, cold gaze, looking at you like a copy. Your birth mother, who in the original would return at the perfect moment to hurt you again. The script wanted tears and tug of war, but real life allows staying if someone dares to be responsible. She approached and called your name. You didn't run to hug her, and you didn't hide behind me. You stood still and asked, "Who are you?" She trembled. I'm your mom." You looked at her and said calmly, "My mom is at home. My mom is holding my hand." She sobbed. I said gently, "You may talk, but don't seize a place with emotion. She isn't an object to pull." We sat in the hospital cafe. She spoke of years of fear and poverty and pressure. I listened without painting it pretty. I asked, "What do you want now?" She said, "To make up for it." I replied, "Making up for it isn't appearing twice and vanishing. It's stability, persistence, respect for boundaries. If you can do that, she will decide whether to open the door." You sipped milk and said, "I need time." The meta layer wanted you to either cling or scream hatred. You chose time. Time is power. Not a climax, but healing. Over the years she came. She stopped performing tragedy and learned to wait. Once she brought you an airplane model kit. You asked, "Did you buy this to make me like you? Or because you remember I like airplanes?" She choked and said, "Because I remember you like airplanes." You opened it, but you still didn't call her mom. I didn't force anything. I told you, many people can love you, but only you decide what to call them. At 12, the school held a camp. In the original, it was the set for a small fire and destiny rescue. I watched the hands trying to build the scene, saw the seal on strangers' wrists, and had the power cut. The schedule changed. No fire happened. So they shifted the climax into a rumor online that you were illegitimate, bought by the stepmother, fake sweet. Rumors are like text unseen, but they cut. You didn't fight and didn't cry in public. You came home, set your phone on the table, and said, "Mom, I'm tired." I held you. "If you're tired, rest. Then we deal with it." Your father asked, "Lawyer?" You shook your head. "I want to speak." Next day you stood before the class and said, "You don't have to like me. Just don't make things up. If you wonder, ask me. Don't use words to scare people. No melodrama, no tears." The class fell silent. The rumor died because it had no fuel from a blown-up reaction. You learned not to feed text. At 14, you started asking bigger questions, about fairness, about choice. I taught you to separate love from binding. "Anyone who loves you still has no right to decide you," I said. "Love is respecting your choice even when it hurts them." You laughed, Mom. "You talk like a book." I laughed back, because I once lived in books. The meta layer tried to make you know the truth so you'd panic. One day you found a black notebook in your bag, bearing the pen and the moon seal. You asked, "What is this?" I answered honestly, "Something people use to write fate." You asked, "Am I being written?" "Yes," I said. "Someone wants to. But you can refuse." You opened it. Mandatory scenes for your 15th year isolation. A public slap, running away, destiny encounter, blackening. You closed it and asked, "Can I tear it?" I handed you scissors. You tore a page. The paper twitched like skin, but it tore. The words rose and vanished. You exhaled. "Not that hard." I felt pride and ache, because you never should have needed this skill, but you had it. Then the meta layer played their final blow, not at you, but at me. A draft titled "Doom in Final Chapter," where I would die protecting you so you could grow. They love killing good mothers for tears. I read it and laughed. I had survived bullets and borders for duty. I would not die as someone else's seasoning. I set the draft on the dining table before you and your father. "They want me dead," I said. Your father went pale. You gripped my hand. I asked you, "What do you want?" You answered instantly, "I want you alive." I nodded. Then we rewrite. That night we sat around the table, not reading but making a family anchor. Your father wrote, "I will protect my family with presence, not money." You wrote, "I will grow by learning, not loss." I wrote, "I will live, and I won't ask permission." We taped them to the fridge. After that, the seal in our home faded, as if the meta layer hates most when characters agree together on a way to grow. But they still tried. One rainy night, the power flickered. In the original, an intruder would break in. I'd be stabbed, you'd witness it, and you'd blacken. That night I was cooking chicken porridge. You were studying. Your father was fixing a flashlight. Glass shattered downstairs. Your father rushed down. I pulled you into a room, locked the door, called police. But the intruder wasn't a thief. He was a meta-editor carrying a word knife, a blade made of sentences. He stood under the stairs and smiled. Time for the climax. I stepped out with the broken pen. Wrong house, I said. He flicked his hand. Word blades flew toward my shoulder. The exact wound described in the draft. I dodged, not because I feared pain, but because I would not give him what he wanted. Your father lunged. The editor slid like a shadow. From behind me you shouted, "Stop!" He turned, amused. A supporting character dares command? You shouted back, "I'm not a supporting character. I'm me." In that moment the word knife wavered. You didn't punch. You grabbed his draft and tore it. The paper ripped. The words dissolved. He screamed like someone losing authority. I tapped the broken pen to his forehead and wrote a period. A period is an ending. He vanished, leaving only damp ink smell. Police arrived to find shattered glass and a house lit by flashlights. No one died. No one was sacrificed. The climax failed. The next morning I drove you to school. You stepped out and said, "Mom, I'm not scared anymore." "Not scared of what?" I asked. "Not scared of being written," you said. "Because I can say no." I smiled. "And you can say yes to what you want." You ran into the gate, hair flying like an arrow toward the sky. I remembered you at 8 with that 0% test. The hallway at night, your "I want to be myself" in front of a pen name. In a novel, those would be called not dramatic enough. To me, they were the core of a life. I don't know whom you will love, or whether you will love at all. I don't need you to fit heroine or supporting girl. I only want you to know, love is not a trap that demands you erase yourself. Love is a free choice between adults. If you meet someone good, they won't need you to suffer to prove you're precious, won't need your jealousy to prove you care, won't need your losses to make you deep. If you meet someone who wants to cast you into a role, you can smile, close the book, and walk out into daylight, because you are you. And I am not a stepmother of a wicked supporting girl. I chose to be your mother, every day, through small acts, until words had less power than warmth. This is our new story. No predetermined finale, only tomorrows you write with choice. Supplement, the ordinary days that saved us. Once you failed P because you couldn't run fast. You came home and said, "I'm bad." I said, "You're learning your pace." Your father took you to the park and ran with you slow until you both wheezed and laughed. You learned, you don't always have to win. Sometimes you just don't quit. Another time you argued with your birth mother and said, "I don't know what to call you." She didn't force you. She said, "Call me anything, as long as it doesn't hurt you." You told me, and I said, "That's a good sign. Real people respect boundaries." One Tet holiday we wrapped sticky rice cakes. Your fathers were crooked. You laughed until you couldn't breathe. I took photos and taped them to the fridge. If the meta layer saw it, they'd call it no drama. But those moments left the script with nowhere to cling. The day you received your acceptance letter, you didn't scream like in movies. You just stood still and hugged me tight. I heard you whisper, "Thank you for not leaving me." I whispered back, "Thank you for not leaving yourself." And if one day you read this, remember, someone out there may still love to control with a pen. But in our home, the most important pen has always been in your hand. Keep writing the way you want. One evening you asked, "What if I had really driven you away back then?" I thought and said, "I would still have sat outside your door like the first night." Sometimes children push people away only to see who comes back. You said, "Then I'm lucky." I shook my head. Not luck choice. I chose to stay. You chose to open the door. Your father chose to change. Your birth mother chose responsibility. Family isn't a miracle that falls from the sky. It's the times people return to the table after a fight, apologies without conditions, respecting a no. You laughed. You talk like a book again. I laughed. Yes, but this book has no editor except you. You put a hand to your chest as if confirming a real heartbeat. I thought, if the meta layer returns, they'll meet someone different. A Thai Dung who knows how to write. And then I can step back, not because I quit, but because you can hold the pen yourself. You asked, "Are you afraid of being forgotten?" I said, "Of course. Everyone is." But I learned, to be remembered, you don't need to hurt others. Just live truthfully with those you love. People remember warmth, not wounds. You nodded. Then I'll remember you by the smell of chicken porridge and your voice waking me up. My eyes stung. Outside, distant fireworks bloomed like bright punctuation on the night. I hugged you and thought, this is the ending I choose, an open ending, where tomorrow continues. And if you ever ask me, do you regret transmigrating into the stepmother role? I will answer, no, because without that fall, I would not have met you. I would not have learned to become your mother by listening to a stubborn but lonely child. I would not have learned to turn words into bridges instead of cages. My girl, your life will have pages crossed out, lines rewritten, people who claim to be the author of you. But remember, pencil can be erased, ink can be corrected, and most importantly, you may close the book at any time and step outside to breathe. I don't need you to be a dazzling character. I only need you to be a happy person. The end. Added chapters. So the sky has more room. When you turned 18, you stopped being a child in a plot and became a young adult with deadlines, scholarships, and the quiet panic of choosing a future. In the original story, 18 was the age when the supporting girl would finally fall in love and spiral. Miscommunication, humiliation, sacrifice, redemption. The meta layer loved that arc because it was easy to sell, but you were busy building things that could actually fly. You spent nights drawing wing profiles, running simulations, arguing with teammates about materials and weight, and laughing over instant noodles at 2 a.m. That kind of life had no dramatic soundtrack, yet it made your eyes bright. I watched you from the kitchen doorway and realized, the best revenge against a script is competence. Steady, practical, unglamorous competence. The meta layer tried again, shifting from tragedy to temptation. A glossy reality docuseries invited you to join. Full scholarship, global exposure, industry connections. On the condition that cameras could record your daily life, your family, your private moments. In tiny print was the pen and the moon seal. It wasn't a scholarship. It was a contract to turn you into content. You read it and asked me, if I refuse, will I regret it? I said, regret is normal, but choose what lets you remain you. You took a pen and wrote on the form, in your neat handwriting, agree to study. Do not agree to be filmed. You returned it with your own terms. A week later, the offer vanished as if it had never existed. The meta layer hates negotiation. It hates when a character knows she can rewrite conditions instead of accepting them as fate. That year, you also learned something the original story never taught you. How to lose without turning the loss into an identity. Your first prototype drone crashed during a campus demo. The frame snapped, the propellers shattered, and your team stood in the grass staring at wreckage. In the script, this would be the moment you cried, ran away, and waited for a male lead to pull you back with a romantic speech. You did none of that. You crouched down, collected the broken pieces, and said, okay. We found the weak point. Then you bought a new set of parts with your own savings and built again. I wanted to clap, but I only made you ginger tea and let you work. Sometimes support is not applause. It's making sure the room stays warm while someone rebuilds. At 19, you moved into a dorm. Your father pretended to be calm but kept calling to ask if the food was decent, if the water heater worked, if your roommate was kind. I teased him for being dramatic, and he scowled, then admitted softly, I'm scared of not being needed. I told him, you'll always be needed, just not as a controller. Be needed as a safe place. He nodded, and that night he learned to stop texting you every hour, and instead send one message. If you need me, I'm here. It was a small sentence, but it was an anchor. The meta layer waited until you were far from home to try a sharper blade. A scandal account on campus social media posted a thread accusing you of cheating, claiming your project had been sponsored by your father's company, claiming your success was bought. In the original story, this would be your public downfall, the perfect humiliation scene. They even staged the classic moment. A crowded lecture hall, whispers rising. A professor asked to address the allegations. You stood at the podium and did not tremble. You opened your laptop and calmly presented version histories, lab logs, receipts, and emails. You invited the department to audit your work. You ended with one line. If you want to judge me, judge my process, not your story about me. The room fell silent. The thread was deleted the next day. I later learned the account name had been Meta-Editor 7. You didn't celebrate. You proposed a workshop on academic integrity and cybersecurity for new students. You turned their knife into a lesson for everyone. And that is how you starve the meta layer. You refuse to keep pain private. You turn it into public knowledge without becoming cruel. Then came the night before your first major competition, the National Aerospace Challenge. It was a big stage, the kind the meta layer loves, because big stages are easy to hijack. At midnight, the familiar knock came at our door. A white envelope. Inside, one sentence, cold as a printed warning. If she wins, you will lose your right to step outside the story. It was meant for me, not for you, meant to make me hesitate, to make me pull you back, to make me become a controlling mother for your own good, thus rewriting our family into the script they preferred. I sat at the table and stared at the paper. Your father poured me water and waited. After a long silence, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was transparent. I opened the pocket watch. Its hands were moving steadily now. In the glass, there were no roaring comments, only a quiet line. Timeline stabilized by anchors. Choice. I folded the envelope and placed it in the trash. Then I walked into your room. You were asleep with your notebook open, diagrams scattered like little wings across the bed. I kissed your forehead and whispered, "Tomorrow, do what you always do. Choose." You won. Not because destiny loved you, but because you did the work. You walked out of the competition hall with a tired smile, and your team lifted the trophy like it was simply evidence. No fireworks, no background music. Just a group of young people, grateful to their own effort. That evening we celebrated with hot pot in our small living room. Your father tried to act cool, then cried quietly when you weren't looking. While we ate, the lights flickered and, in the center of the room, a paper door unfolded as if someone had cut it out of the air. A voice said, "Come." Editorial hearing. Your father reached for your hand. You reached for mine. You said, "I'll go with you." I shook my head. "No. You stay. This one is between me and the people who think they own pens." You looked at me and said, "Then remember what you taught me. Don't let them write you." I nodded and stepped through the paper door. This time the meta layer looked different. No long editing table. Instead, an empty auditorium, tiered seats without faces, as if the audience had already left and only the controllers remained. On stage were 3 podiums: author, editor, character. I stood at character. A figure stepped to author, clearer than before. Young, hollow-eyed, ink-stained fingers, like someone who had written too many nights. They said, "I wrote you. I wrote the girl. I just wanted the story to be good." I asked, "Good for whom? Good enough to make strangers cry?" The editor barked, "A story needs rules. Characters must pay consequences." I replied, "Consequences of choice? Yes. Consequences you assign to harvest emotion? No." The author's voice cracked. "If I don't write tragedy, no one will read. I'm afraid of being forgotten. I'm afraid I'm useless." I didn't mock them. I said, "Your fear is yours, but when you use it to hurt my child, you hide behind ink to avoid responsibility." They whispered, "Then what should I write?" I answered, "Write truth. Write a child learning to say no. Write a father learning to stay. Write a mother who was cast as a villain and chose to love anyway. That isn't less good. It's just not cheap." The auditorium trembled. Draft pages fluttered like paper birds. The editor shouted, "You're destroying structure." I looked at the author and asked, "Do you really want to be remembered as someone who hurt children for applause?" The author lowered their head. Their hand loosened. The pen slipped from their fingers and clinked on the stage floor. They said, very softly, "I'm sorry. No spotlight. No grand redemption. Just a simple apology. An anchor made of truth." In that instant, the pen in the moon seals across the pages cracked like eggshells. The auditorium didn't explode. It dismantled, like a set being taken down. I fell through warm light, kitchen light, and opened my eyes in our living room. You and your father were there. You ran to me and asked only, "Are you okay?" I nodded. "Okay. And I think they will write us less." Your father exhaled and laughed. "So now we can just live?" I looked at you and said, "Yes, live. And when needed, write in the margin, 'I choose.'" After that, the meta layer did not vanish completely. Nothing that loves control disappears overnight, but its attacks became rare. And when they happened, they were smaller, like paper cuts instead of knives. A strange email once arrived at your internship. Mandatory scene. Public failure. The next day, the company's server crashed. In the original arc, you would have been blamed and fired, and your confidence would break. This time, you calmly traced the problem, documented it, proposed fixes, and your supervisor thanked you in front of the team. Later, you told me, if they want a failure scene, I'll give them a lesson scene instead. I laughed until my stomach hurt. On your 20th birthday, you asked me a question that sounded small, but carried the weight of everything. Mom, if I had really driven you away when I was 8, what would you have done? I thought, then answered honestly. I would still have sat outside your door like the first night. Sometimes children push people away, only to see whether anyone comes back. You stared at me, then whispered. Then I was lucky. I shook my head. Not luck, choice. I chose to stay. You chose to open the door. Your father chose to change. Your birth mother chose to take responsibility. Family isn't magic. It's repeated returns. You laughed. You sound like a book again. I smiled. This book has no editor except you. And now when you read this as a grown woman, maybe with your own apartment, your own work, your own storms, I want to add one more thing I learned from fighting pens. The meta layer can only control what you refuse to look at. The moment you name the mechanism, this is a script bait, this is a forced scene, this is someone selling me a role. You take away its invisibility. Then you can choose. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to be perfect. You only have to be honest with yourself. If a job wants to turn your exhaustion into a badge, you can refuse. If a relationship wants to turn your sacrifice into proof, you can refuse. If a family expectation wants to turn you into a symbol rather than a person, you can refuse. And you can also say yes. Yes to learning. Yes to building. Yes to love that respects. Yes to rest without guilt. Yes to joy that doesn't need a tragedy behind it. So when you feel the world pressing you into a tidy label, good daughter, strong woman, perfect partner, inspiring survivor, remember the simplest line that broke the black notebook. I want to be myself. That line is not selfish. It is oxygen. I don't know what kind of sky you will fly into. But I know this. Every flight begins by stepping off someone else's runway. If you ever hear a knock and see a white envelope, you don't have to panic. Look around for your anchors. The people who stay, the work that matters, the boundaries you've earned, the warmth you've built. Then write in the margin, even with trembling hands, I choose. And if you ever wonder what the biggest inheritance I can give you is,